Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I've started recording. We're gonna wait, I think maybe another minute or so, just let a few more people join us and then we'll get started. Okay, why don't we get started? Okay. Welcome everyone. It's so nice of you to join us today. We really are glad to have you with us. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Aviva Gutnick. I'm an editor at Behrman House, and we are thrilled to have Deborah Fripp with us today. I had the great pleasure of working with Deborah on Light from the Darkness, which we're going to talk about in just a little bit. And today's webinar is special for our Golem member educators. We have been doing a number of webinars for our um, Golem friends, and this is just one in, this is actually not part of a series, but this is one of the webinars that we are so happy to offer this spring. And when we wrap up here, I'll tell you about a couple of things coming up that is also special for our Golem educators. So without further ado, because I do want to be mindful of everyone's time today, I want to introduce Deborah Fripp. She is an educator. She is the president of the Teach the Shoah and the Holocaust Programs Coordinator at Congregation Kol Ami in Texas. She has a website called teachtheshoah.org, which maybe Deborah you'll mention later, that provides resources on commemorating, teaching, and understanding the Holocaust for communities, families, and educators. And it is my great pleasure to welcome Deborah.
Thank you. As Aviva said, I'm Dr. Deborah Fripp. I am the president of Teach the Shoah and a Yad Vashem trained Holocaust educator. And let me share my screen so we can get started with the slides. So Teach the Shoah is an organization dedicated to making our history relevant to us and to our youth, and particularly the history of the Holocaust. You can find more about us at teachtheshoah.org. And as Aviva said, I am also the author of Light from the Darkness, a ritual for Holocaust remembrance, and that is what we're going to here to discuss today. So let's talk about Yom HaShoah a little bit. Okay. Traditionally, Yom HaShoah has been a time to listen to survivors tell their stories. That is going to change no matter what we do, because it's been more than 70 years, and even the children of survivors are grandparents. We are close to the time when we are not going to have any survivors left. As this fragile window of witness closes, we need a new way to commemorate the Holocaust. If we don't, the Holocaust will be remembered as just another historical atrocity that was inflicted on the Jewish people. We want it to be remembered as more than that. And to do that, we need a commemoration that doesn't require survivors, that doesn't require individuals who have memory. We need a community ritual for Yom HaShoah, and that is what we have tried to create here. A ritual that will allow us to tell the stories and understand the lessons and gain meaning for us and for future generations. So Light from the Darkness is a ritual in the same vein as the Passover Seder. The Seder was our model for building this ritual. Because when you think about the Seder, the point of the Seder is to tell the story of our survival from a great tragedy, 400 years of slavery, to mourn the bitterness of slavery while celebrating our passage to freedom, to tell the story so that we will remember, and to think about the lessons. Be kind to strangers, trust in God, et cetera, et cetera. The point of Light from the Darkness is to do the same thing for the Holocaust, to tell the story of our survival from a great tragedy, to mourn the losses of the Holocaust while celebrating our survival as a people, to tell the story so that we will remember, and to talk about the lessons of that story. Be vigilant against the rise of hatred, stand up for yourself and others, don't give up on life and faith. In Light from the Darkness, we tell the story in a way that honors the experience of those who were in the Holocaust, both those who survived and those who did not. As such, we're not only talking about their deaths, but also their lives, how they lived, how they survived if they did, how they struggled to maintain some sense of normalcy, even in the most difficult times. We also took another page from the Seder, which is to include as many interactive elements as we could that allow for individual action and interaction. And these are ritual actions that will feel both new and familiar, and that is our intent. The commemoration is aimed at students and adults from middle school, that is age 13 and up. It's designed for congregations and religious schools. At our community, where it was originally written for our congregation, we use it as the Yom Hashoah program for our middle school. And we also do a community Seder for our community. The book includes a leader's guide in the back to help educators, clergy, community members, whoever wants to organize and lead the program. There's also more resources for that on the Teach the Shoah website, and I'll talk more about that at the end. As a community program, it's a way to bring the community together to commemorate this very important part of our history. And this is actually interesting because we wrote it as a Yom HaShoah program for our religious school. And as soon as we started doing it, the members of our community, especially our seniors, started asking us to do it as a community event like the one you're seeing here. As a community event, it is intergenerational. It includes families and elders and kids of various ages. We encourage families to bring their middle schoolers. There's kids age grade 6 and up. The 3rd to 5th graders we allow through parental discretion, and younger than 3rd grade we really discourage. If you look here, you can see this little girl here. She's my daughter, so she has a little more experience than most kids, so it was more appropriate for her. But we do allow them on parental discretion, and parents tend to know what's appropriate for their kids. I like to run this the way I run a Seder, by having people read around the table. That brings them into the telling of the story. And this is one way to do it, the way you see here, seated around a table like you would do a Seder. There are a number of other ways you can do this in an auditorium or a sanctuary with a leader on a beamer or a stage. Works as well, especially in a larger group. And in the back of the book, in the leader's guide, there are suggestions for how to do it in those kinds of ways. And of course, you can also do it remotely. And we will talk more about what kinds of things you should be thinking about when you're doing it remotely later in the program. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about the ritual itself. The ritual is designed to work our way from light to darkness and back to light. We start before the war, recognizing that everyone who was in the Holocaust was somebody before the Holocaust. And so we need to think about who they were and what they were doing before. We work our way through the story as hatred spreads through Germany and the Jews are sent to the ghetto, to remembering those who were sent into hiding and those who were murdered without mercy. But even as we remember the terror and the loss, we work our way back from darkness into light. We remember the strength of the Jews, the strength with which our ancestors held on to both their humanity and their Judaism, even as their enemies were trying to strip them of both. We remember the few people who stood up and helped us. We remember liberation and how they fought to regain their lives. We mourn the dead and we consider the lessons that we should be learning. In the back of the book, you'll find a number of useful appendices, the stories of those who are mentioned in the book and of the communities that are mentioned in the book, a leader's guide, as I said, a discussion guide, and a final poem, which I find is a wonderful way to close out the ceremony at the end. As with the Seder, we have a number of ritual objects and symbols that we include. A sort of signature one is these mismatched candlesticks, where we light our candles as we do at the beginning of all of our sacred times, but we light them on mismatched candlesticks in order to recognize the resilience of our ancestors in the difficult times. As you see, we have a number of things. We use rosemary sprigs and wine to celebrate our life before. We use potato skins dipped in salt water to acknowledge the starvation, and substitute sweet tea for wine in the ghetto where we couldn't get wine. We use fruit with pits to represent the inner strength of the Jews as they were holding strong against the difficulties. We light yahrzeit candles, we share bread. So we try in every section, there is something that we are doing. Some of them include specific objects, some of them are readings or other kinds of activities, but every section has some kind of interactive to draw people in. So let's talk about a couple of specific sections. This is the second section, directly after we've lit our candles. As I said, we're beginning the story before the war. We start with a reading and a quote from a survivor. The ritual is full of these quotes. It's our way of grounding the ritual in the lives of real people. And the stories of all of these people are in the back. This is really important to us to make it clear that that these are real people and not just quotes, that we have to recognize that these people had stories and they were individuals. We follow the readings with a couple of activities. In this case, we smell rosemary to remember the flavorful life we had before the war. We drink wine to celebrate that life, and we say our brachas as we go through these. A couple of other things I want you to note about this page. The artwork in throughout the book is artwork done by people who were in the Holocaust, some of whom survived, some of whom didn't. This was a choice by Berman House that I thought was just brilliant. And the stories of all of these people are also in the back with the stories of those who are quoted. The other thing I want you to note on this page is that in the bottom corner, there is a question. We call them consider questions, and they are ways of spurring discussion. There is also another set of discussion questions in the back under discussion questions. So these are ways to spur discussion as you go through the ceremony, whether you're working with students or you're working with adults. Okay. Here's another example page. This comes shortly after terror, where we've discussed the mass murder, and directly after strength, where we discussed how the Jews held on to their Judaism and their hope. This is the section where we're discussing the righteous, the people who have we have work that was made by the by people who were in the Holocaust. There's a couple of things I want you to note on this page. Is that in some places we have these extra bits of information. So the person that we're discussing in the quote in the text just above, we mentioned the organization Zegota, and so we tell you a little bit about what that is. So these kind of bits of information are scattered throughout the book. The other thing that I wanted you to note is the action in this particular section, because this is the one place where doing things remotely becomes a problem. Because in this section, our interactive action is to reach out and grasp somebody by the hand, as if we're pulling each other to safety. Obviously, we can't do this remotely. So we make an obvious substitution. We reach into the screen and we change the line to, rather than we stand hand to wrist, to we reach hand to wrist. And it works just as well. We have actually had some very positive feedback about that particular change. It's really the only place you have to change the text to make it remote. So let's talk about how to do this remotely. Yes. So this is a picture of the remote setting that I had. These are my daughters again who are helping me. One of the things that I found when I was doing it remotely last year was that we all know by now that you can't have multiple voices at the same time in a Zoom because they tend to overlap in fun ways. You can, if you're willing to deal with the overlap, and I have done that in some settings, but as the leader, I had a couple of other people, that is my daughter in the room with me, so that when we had read togethers, we would read together, and so then you had multiple voices. And this was one of the ways to create multiple voices in the readings that are designed to be done as a group, and that encourages the people who are listening to read with you as well. So as with any remote operation, you need to go through some things beforehand, decide which parts you're going to include, assign leader, assign reader, or decide how you're going to assign readers as you go through if it's a small group. Think about ways to engage your participants. Maybe some of those consider questions or discussion questions to bring up with your participants in the course of the event. You can, if your technology allows, you can break them out into small group breakout sessions and bring them back to report. What modifications you need to do for being online. The real one, the only is the one we just discussed in the help section. And of course, you need to think about your technology. What are you using? Ensuring your readers are visible. One of the funny things about something like this online is that the book has a number where it calls for you to stop. If you stand up, if I were to stand up right now, you would see my belly button. I could walk backwards, but then I have to worry about my headset. And these are all things you need to think about. Are there places you're going to decide not to stand up, or think about how that impacts you as the leader? So the thing about Light in the Darkness, of course, is like a Seder. There are there's a list of things that you need in order to do this, right? That list of symbols that we had at the beginning. You as the leader need to have all of them, and you want to set up your camera, and this can be tricky, to have as many of them visible as possible. Especially you want the candles visible if that's possible. If it's not, and I have had to do this, you can lift things into your camera view as you use them. So you want to make sure you have everything. Your participants don't necessarily have to have everything. What you really want to encourage is you want to make sure they have a copy of the text, or you have a way to show it to them. And you really should encourage them to have their wine, their sweet tea, and bread. These are things that are scattered throughout the book, and by having these, people will feel like they're participating as they go through. But you should also give them the entire list. So this is the entire list. This can seem a little overwhelming, this list, but encourage them to get as many of these things as they can find. I often list the candlesticks as optional, because often when you have these kinds of events, you only light one set of candles. So for the leader to just light the candles is an easy modification, but as many of these other things as they can have, very useful. But also, of course, encourage them to come whether they can get things or not. But one of the things that I've seen is that we've seen some very interesting creative substitutions. This particular person, who wasn't able to get out a whole lot, did some things that really surprised. So the symbols we have is we use oranges for as a symbol of hope that lies beneath bitterness, because the outer shell of the orange is bitter, but the inside is sweet. So she used pineapple for that purpose. Again, an outer shell that you can't eat, and an inner sweetness. As I said, we had the fruit with pits. And I usually think of a fruit that's small enough to bite into, where you hit the pit as you're biting. She used an avocado. Again, a fruit that has an inedible pit. It works. But I think my favorite thing that she did was she could not get potatoes. So I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but she used this book, One Candle by Eve Bunting, which is the story of a survivor who's talking about using a potato in a concentration camp as a Hanukkah candle. So it's a Holocaust story about a potato, and she used that to substitute for potatoes. And it made her feel like she was part of it, even though she couldn't eat it. So creative substitutions can be very, very interesting and useful ways to do that. Okay, so I just blasted through that, and that's all I have to tell you. And let me open it up to questions, and I can tell you more about it if you want. And as I said, and I'll say this again later, at teachtheshoah.org, if you go to that website and click on ritual, you will find more information. Okay, as you guys are coming in, I'm going to stop the share.
Yeah, and I just want to thank you, Deborah. And I have just allowed all of you to talk. It looks like that you have muted yourselves, which is great. You obviously know how to do webinars. But if you have any questions or thoughts, feel free to ask. You don't feel like you need to type anything into a chat.
And I'm seeing all of you, so you can put if you have the opportunity, you can put your video on. I don't know. Do they have the chance to put their video
on? They can, yeah.
Okay, so if you want to put your video on, we can have a little meeting. That we could do that too.
Yeah, and I just want to say, thank you, Deborah. I think that, in helping sort of think through this concept and put it into a book format, it's super slim and thin, and as Golem members, which you all are, you received, or you should have received this last spring. If you are newer to the Golem program and for some reason you didn't get a copy of this, let us know, because we'd like to get it to you. And also to help you try this out. I mean, this is a weird year. Obviously, last year was a weird year too. You know, if you want to try out doing a community or congregational approach like this to Holocaust commemoration, we've made it into a digital turn page version so that you can, you know, you don't have to hold up a book. You can share it online in a really clean way. It's an exact duplicate of the print text itself. So that link to the digital version will be sent out in an email either later today or tomorrow, so that you can see it, you can try it out. You know, be as ambitious or less ambitious as you would like. You know, if this is something that you might like to try with a class, with a teen group, or with a you know, an intergenerational group, this is the year to experiment. And we've made it available in, you know, print form or digital form for you to be able to do that. Are there any questions about Light from the Darkness, about this concept in general? I know Deborah went through quite a lot of material in there, and if you're not familiar with the book, or you haven't had a chance to get your hands on it, you may not be familiar with some of the nuts and bolts, but it's a beautiful program. It runs, you know, I don't know, what do you say, Deborah, 45 minutes?
45 minutes, right. It runs about 45 minutes, maybe an hour, depending on how much you're switching around between readers. So between 45 minutes and an hour.
Okay. I think Diane had her hand up to ask a question. You can feel free to jump in.
Sure, I'm George. That's my wife's name got on there.
Oh, okay.
For some reason.
Okay.
Diane, sorry about
Hi,
that.
George.
Hi. First of all, one of my questions was, how long does it normally take with a group? And you just answered that while I was waiting. The second was, I just wanted to say this was brilliant. When I first got it last spring, I devoured it and thought it was great. And I did use some of it for a program earlier this year. We do a community Holocaust Education Day around International Holocaust Remembrance Day. So I used it as part of the thing. I'm trying to figure out, I'm not gonna be able to use it this year just because of our calendar, but I'm trying to figure out, is it better intergenerationally or with a classroom, do you think?
I think it's useful for both, and it's a very different kind of program. I actually think personally, I like the community seder better. That I find you get, the community seder really brings the community together. And we, you know, this year, for instance, Yom Hashoah is on a Friday. I'm going to be doing a remote program on Thursday evening, but if I were doing it in person at my synagogue, I would be doing it the following Sunday. And actually what we do is we do both. We do it with the middle schoolers during Sunday school, the way we would do a mock seder. And then we do it in the evening as a community program. But if I were going to pick one, I'd probably pick the community program. It's the adults tend to appreciate it a little more than the students do. And the adults get a lot out of it.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Other questions?
No. Okay. Okay. Well,
Okay, so
short and sweet. If you find that you do have other questions that come to you afterward, please send an email to, I'll give out my email, and Deborah, if you want to give out your contact information.
actually, let me bring back up the screen share, the slides, and get us to our final page. Here's the customer support. and my email, and again, Teach the Shoah. And if you go to Teach the Shoah and you click on ritual, or you go to teachtheshoah.org/ritual, there's lots more information and suggestions for how to do it and things that you can do with it and things like that. And of course, links to Berman House to purchase coffee if you need.
Yeah.
Somebody.
Okay. And as I said, I'm going to send a follow-up email to everyone. We've been recording this today, so we'll send out a link to the recording if you want to watch it back or share it with anyone else in your community or congregation. So I'll be sending the link to that. I will also be sending information about how to get the Light from Darkness in the digital turn page version. It's just a link and a password. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. We've made it available in digital version for the month of March and April, so you can try it out that way as well. And that information will be coming shortly. So that's all. I want to thank Deborah so much for joining us today. I know you have quite a lot going on. You're in the middle of a move, so
Yeah, yes.
a big
and actually we're on spring break at the moment too. So
okay. So thank you for doing this. This has been wonderful. And you know, I know that Holocaust commemoration is a something that as a Jewish community, I don't think we've spent enough time really thinking about how do we do it. You know, we do it the way that we've always done it, which is we have survivors come and speak, or you know, children of come and speak and share stories and panel discussions, which is always, you know, at least, you know, the way I grew up, and I'm sure many of you, you know, experienced just moving and personal and intimate. And I really appreciate the thought that you've given into creating a new way of doing this in the future, because, you know, we've been privileged, you know, to know survivors, but our children will not have that
Right.
experience. And so
Right.
it's really important and it's really beautiful. And I'm just so glad that you have taken this on. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And with that, I will say thank you to our participants and our guests, and we hope to see you soon, and a Chag Sameach, since it is upon us soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Okay. Bye.